It was a calm Sunday afternoon in Tijeras, New Mexico, the kind of day where nothing much happens, and the only sounds are the wind and the occasional passing car. But that quiet didn't last. Suddenly, a series of loud cracks echoed from a house sitting on a large private lot. Neighbors weren't sure. Were those gunshots or something else? Then came the sound of a dog crying out, and silence. No one knew it yet, but something terrible was happening inside. And when a young man finally walked out to meet the police, the words he spoke and what officers later found would leave everyone stunned. The Mestre family was not widely known in the community, but for those who did know them, they were remembered as a quiet and reserved household. The family was composed of the father, Raimundo, his wife, Bertha, and their three children, Nancy, Adlai, and Brielle. They had settled in the small community of Tijeras, New Mexico, around 2021. Renting a house that stood out for its generous plot of land, they enjoyed a wide open yard, spacious, private, and ideal for a peaceful life. This property quickly became one of the defining features of their home. Raimundo was seen as a hard-working man, deeply dedicated to his family. Bertha was known for managing the household with warmth and kindness, a quality that earned her the affection of neighbors and acquaintances. By 2024, their eldest daughter Nancy had moved in with her partner. As autumn approached, she was expecting her first child, and the entire family looked forward to the baby's arrival with joy and anticipation. But that season of hope would not last. An unexpected and devastating event was about to shatter their world, replacing excitement with grief. On Sunday, October 13th, just before 2 p.m., emergency services received a call from a concerned man named Daniel. He explained that he owned the property next to his own, but had rented it out for years to a pleasant family, the Mestres. About an hour and a half earlier, he had heard several loud bangs. To him, they sounded like gunshots, 5 or 6 in total, followed by a single isolated shot roughly 10 minutes later. He also thought he heard the distressed cry of a dog. At first, he considered the possibility that he might be overreacting, but when he tried to contact the family by phone and received no answer, his worry grew. He walked to the house, rang the doorbell multiple times, and still got no response. That's when he decided it was time to call the police. By the time officers arrived, around 3 p.m., their body cameras recorded the unfolding events. The officers approached the home, unaware that they were about to step into a scene that would defy anything they had prepared for. They knocked on the door. For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence. Then, a young man emerged. He appeared disoriented, his movements unsteady. This was 24-year-old Adlai. His first words were chilling. His family had attacked him. When asked to clarify, he said it happened in his bedroom and that the weapon used was a knife. The officers instructed him to step closer. When asked if he was armed, Adlai said yes, and in a sudden motion appeared to reach for something. The officers quickly ordered him to turn around so they could restrain and search him. Adlai did not resist. While being handcuffed, he was asked again to explain exactly what had happened. This time, he said they had tried to stab him in the heart. According to him, his father had been wielding the knife, while his sister held a meat-tenderizing hammer. He then stated, without hesitation, that he had ended their lives. What unfolded next was only the beginning of a story that would grow darker and far stranger by the minute. Almost without warning, Adlai began speaking again, but his words quickly drifted into bizarre and incomprehensible territory. His statements were disjointed, surreal, and impossible to follow, leaving officers unsure whether they were hearing fragments of a confession or the ramblings of a mind lost in chaos. When they searched him, they found a firearm tucked into his pants pocket. He surrendered it without resistance. The officers secured him in the back of a patrol car before turning their attention to the house. Standing at the doorway, they called out for anyone inside to come out with their hands up, but no one emerged. That's when they noticed the first signs of what they were truly dealing with: dark, reddish stains on the entryway floor. The patterns were unmistakable. Something violent had happened here. While waiting for backup, the officers began piecing together the grim picture forming before them. When reinforcements arrived, they made entry. Inside, the scene grew more unsettling with each step. The walls bore scattered droplets of blood, the trail climbing the staircase and soaking into the carpet, as though someone had been dragged toward the upper floor. In one area, they found a dog lying motionless, badly injured. They suspected it had been beaten, explaining some of the stains mixed into the scene. Despite combing through each room, they found no sign of the family. The search then moved to the backyard, where they quickly spotted more drag marks leading away from the house. But the yard was vast, stretching far beyond the officers' immediate line of sight. One officer returned to the patrol car, hoping Adlai could narrow down the search area. When approached, Adlai's first words were a plea not to be harmed. The officer reassured him. They only wanted to know where his family was. But instead of answering, Adlai asked if the officer had seen the dog, his tone carrying an odd, almost excited inflection. The officer pressed the question again. Finally, Adlai admitted that the bodies were in the backyard. He had planned to bury them. He then gave specific directions to their location. The information was relayed to the search team, and within minutes, they made the grim discovery: the bodies of 46-year-old Raimundo, 51-year-old Bertha, and 17-year-old Brielle. Adlai's confession to ending their lives was, at least in this detail, the truth. After confirming the deaths, officers searched Adlai once more before transporting him for questioning. But once again, his words unraveled into a tapestry of delusions. Claims that the bodies had been convulsing and foaming at the mouth, that their wounds were somehow healed. At the sheriff's office, Adlai was led into an interrogation room. For a brief moment, he was cooperative, even assuring officers that he wouldn't cause trouble. But his behavior soon became erratic, creating unexpected challenges for the department. After being left alone for a short time, barely moving except to acknowledge something invisible in the room, he was joined by a detective. The moment the detective introduced himself, Adlai launched into another incoherent story. This one blended references to seismic waves, the Big Ben clock tower, a submarine, and an unidentified woman, as if mocking the situation or as if his alleged crimes carried no weight. The detective allowed him to speak for several minutes before handing him a pen and paper, asking him to write his account. Adlai agreed without hesitation. It was during this exchange that the detective realized this would be no ordinary interrogation. Following procedure, he read Adlai his rights and made sure he understood. Then he asked directly what had happened to his family. But instead of a straightforward answer, Adlai began another surreal account, this time claiming they had been facing some kind of catastrophic event, and that although he tried to leave, a voice from his own conscience demanded that he proceed. The detective immediately pressed him to clarify what he meant by proceed. Without hesitation, Adlai responded, "Kill." He then went on to claim that his family had lost consciousness, though he insisted he didn't know what they did afterward. In the same breath, he added a disturbing and grotesque detail that they had spent nearly half an hour eating parts of their bodies. He also admitted that afterward, he shot the family dog. The animal was rushed for emergency veterinary care, suffering from 3 gunshot wounds. Despite the efforts to save it, the injuries were too severe and the dog had to be euthanized. Back at the crime scene, investigators recovered a mop soaked with reddish stains. In the interrogation room, the detective continued to push for specifics, asking Adlai where his father had been during the attack and where he had delivered the fatal blows. At first, Adlai's words dissolved into nonsense. Eventually, he stated that his father had been in the living room when he sustained the fatal injuries. Though officers had already located bullet casings inside the house, they also found other evidence: a meat tenderizing hammer stained with blood and a bladed weapon. This combination of clues led them to speculate on the sequence of the killings, but Adlai's statements only deepened the mystery. When questioned about his mother, how and where he had attacked her, Adlai claimed she had been wandering the house in a daze. He said he then led his father and sister into the same room, but suddenly became frightened and fired a gun through the wall. Later, when asked what he did with the bodies after killing them, Adlai answered with chilling calm, showing no sign of remorse. He said he had intended to bury them. Among his incoherent written notes, the detective found disturbing references to possession by dark forces and claims that his family had tried to curse him. It became clear there might be far more to his mental state than he was revealing. Hoping to learn more, the detective asked if he had ever sought medical help for mental health issues. Adlai said yes, but quickly added that his visits had been because of curses placed upon him. Left alone again, his behavior became stranger still. At one point, he appeared to hold a conversation with someone who wasn't there. Then, in an unsettling turn, he urinated into a plastic bottle. When the detective returned and realized what he had done, he reprimanded him, telling him he could have asked to use the restroom. Once more, the detective stepped out, instructing him to behave himself. But Adlai showed no signs of calming down. Instead, his erratic behavior escalated to a disturbing level. He began shouting to God, then suddenly turned to address the men in the room. Rising to his feet, he moved in a way that, captured on camera, would mark the moment the situation took a sharp, alarming turn. Without warning, Adlai began violently kicking the wall of the interrogation room. Within moments, he had created a hole large enough to squeeze through, escaping into the hallway. He made a direct path toward the elevators. The noise drew the attention of deputies, who intercepted him just seconds later. It became clear that the walls of the sheriff's office were never designed to hold someone determined to break out. Deciding it was too risky to keep him inside, they placed him in the back of a patrol car to let him calm down. Once he appeared more settled, Adlai was brought back inside for processing: photographs, a buccal DNA swab, and the collection of his clothing. He was issued a temporary jumpsuit and escorted back to the patrol vehicle. This time, the destination was the county jail. Upon arrival, he was placed in an intake-holding cell. Meanwhile, investigators located his sister, Nancy, and prepared for the devastating task of telling her that most of her family had been killed in one of the most brutal and violent ways imaginable. The body camera footage of that moment shows Nancy's reaction. She became visibly agitated, her voice breaking through sobs as she repeated in shock, "I was not expecting them. I was not expecting them." When told about her brother's alleged role in the killings, her crying intensified, and she struggled to process the reality. Later, during an interview with detectives, Nancy offered insight into why Adlai might have mentioned possession in his earlier statements. With a mix of disbelief and anger, she revealed that within the family, Some of Adlai's troubling or unusual behaviors had been downplayed or excused, partly due to their mother's belief that he was possessed and therefore not fully responsible for his actions. Nancy, however, rejected that explanation. She believed there had been serious warning signs that went unaddressed, and indeed, during the search of the home, officers found documents dated September, just weeks earlier, stating that Adlai had recently been released from mental health care, where he had been treated for a diagnosed case of psychosis. The records noted hallucinations, auditory voices, and even a claim that he had approached police inquiring whether they knew the truth about his reality and if they might consider him for employment in law enforcement. According to those same records, Adlai had expressed an intention to apply to the police academy. The paperwork was photographed for evidence. Nancy also told detectives that at the time of his discharge, mental health professionals had concluded he was not a danger to himself or others and that he had never mentioned any intent to harm his family. When asked about his medication, Nancy confirmed he was prescribed treatment but admitted he was not taking it consistently. She had confronted him about it herself, worried for his well-being. She said she wasn't the only one. Her mother had even found pills in the trash. Everyone in the household had urged him to take his medication. Despite these issues, Nancy said her brother had appeared normal for months leading up to the killings. Authorities later confirmed that the firearm believed to have been used in the murders was legally registered to their mother. On Monday, October 14th, the sheriff held a press conference, calling the case highly complex and in need of thorough analysis. He disclosed Adlai's medical history and shared key investigative findings. The sheriff also raised concerns about the state's red flag gun laws, measures that allow authorities to temporarily remove firearms from individuals deemed a danger to themselves or others, suggesting that such intervention might have prevented the tragedy. Daniel, the neighbor who had first called 911, spoke to reporters as well. Still shaken, he said he had never noticed anything alarming about the family and remembered them only as kind and friendly. On Friday, October 18th, 5 days after the murders, Adlai appeared in court for his initial hearing. One of the responding officers testified, describing the scene as brutal. Prosecutors told the judge they had recovered 10 9mm shell casings from the property and that the victims also showed signs of blunt force trauma. The state played security footage from the sheriff's office showing Adlai breaking through the wall during his attempted escape. Though calmer that day, the sight of the video prompted him to interrupt his own attorney, insisting he wanted to speak. Ignoring his lawyer's advice, he loudly claimed his medication had been stolen and that he had tried to escape because he was afraid. He repeated strange claims about his parents and sister expelling strange liquids from their mouths, urging the media to release forensic photographs to prove he was telling the truth, and that he had acted only to save his own life. Adlai was formally charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder, 5 counts of evidence tampering, 1 count of extreme cruelty to animals, 1 count of escape from police custody, and 1 count of criminal damage to public property. His attorney argued for supervised release with proper medication, but the judge sided with prosecutors, ruling that Adlai was a danger to the community and ordering him held without bond. Months later, in April 2025, a judge declared Adlai incompetent to stand trial and ordered him transferred to a mental health facility for treatment. His competency will be evaluated again in the future. For now, no updates have been released, and it is presumed that he remains hospitalized, awaiting the court's final decision. Now that the full scope of this harrowing case is known, the question remains: will the justice system ultimately bring closure to the Mestre family? Or will investigative challenges, mental health complexities, and systemic gaps in firearm regulation leave the truth forever clouded?